Marcus Rivera counted the coins for the fourth time at 2 in the morning. The fluorescent light above his kitchen table buzzed and flickered, casting shadows across the pile of quarters, dimes, and nickels that represented 3 weeks of tips. $47 short. He needed exactly $427 for Lily's heart medication refill, and the pharmacy had already extended his credit twice. A quarter rolled off the edge of the table, hit the worn linoleum floor, and spun in lazy circles before settling near the baseboard where paint curled away from the wall like dried leaves. The apartment was silent except for that coin spinning down and the hum of the refrigerator that only worked if you kicked the bottom panel twice each morning. Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes until colors bloomed behind his eyelids. He'd worked 53 hours this week at the Golden Oak, hauling plates of $70 entrees to people who left their BMW keys on white tablecloths like casual threats. His feet ached. His lower back sent hot wires of pain up his spine every time he bent to pick up a dropped napkin. None of that mattered. What mattered was the $47 he didn't have in the 5 days until Lily's prescription ran out. A small voice from the bedroom doorway made him flinch. Lily stood there in her oversized pink pajamas, the ones with dancing bears that used to fit her last year, but now hung loose because she'd stopped growing. At 7 years old, she should have been gaining weight, getting taller, demanding new clothes every season. Instead, her body seemed to be conserving energy, shutting down non-essential systems to keep her damaged heart beating. Her hand pressed against her chest in that way that made Marcus want to tear the world apart. The words came out small and careful, like she was afraid of the answer. "Does it hurt a lot, sweetheart?" Lily shook her head too quickly, the lie transparent as window glass. She padded across the cold floor on bare feet, and Marcus scooped her up, feeling how light she was, how fragile, like holding a bird with hollow bones. She tucked her head under his chin, and he could feel her heart through her thin pajamas, fluttering irregular and wrong. "I just couldn't sleep," she whispered against his shoulder. "Were you counting something?" Marcus turned his body as she couldn't see the coins, the bills, the desperate mathematics of poverty. "Just figuring out our budget, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." She pulled back to look at his face, and he saw Camilla in her eyes, that same deep brown that could see through his careful lies, that same gentle intelligence that refused to accept easy answers. "Are you sad, Daddy?" The question landed like a fist in his solar plexus. Marcus swallowed against the tightness in his throat and arranged his face into something he hoped resembled calm. "No, sweetheart. I'm just tired. Late night at work." Lily studied him for another moment, then seemed to accept this partial truth. Her fingers played with the collar of his undershirt, tracing the frayed edge. "When can I get the coloring book? The one with the unicorns?" $4.99. He'd seen it in the toy store window 3 weeks ago when they walked past on the way to her last cardiology appointment. She'd pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging the window, and asked so politely, so hopefully, if maybe they could get it sometime. He'd said yes, of course, soon, knowing that soon stretched into an impossible distance when you had $12.37 in your checking account and an eviction notice folded in your dresser drawer. "Real soon, Lily, I promise." She smiled then, trusting him completely, and the weight of that trust felt heavier than anything he'd carried in his years of hauling trays and clearing tables and swallowing his pride with every condescending glance from customers who treated him like animate furniture. He carried her back to bed, tucked the thin blanket around her shoulders, and stayed until her breathing evened out into sleep. On her nightstand sat the stuffed rabbit Camilla had given her for her 4th birthday, 3 months before the accident. The rabbit's fur was matted now, one ear hanging by threads, but Lily refused to sleep without it. Marcus touched the rabbit's head gently, remembering Camilla's hand stitching the ear back on that first time it tore, her voice humming something in Spanish while Lily watched with wide eyes. That was before the night shift, before the 12-hour rotation at Carolina Medical Center that Camilla had hated but needed, because Marcus's waiter salary barely covered rent. Before she'd driven home at dawn with exhausted eyes and slower reflexes, before the semi-truck ran the red light at the intersection of Meeting and Calhoun, before the police officer showed up at Marcus's door with a face that told him everything before words became necessary. No one paid for that. The truck driver had died too. Camilla's insurance policy had lapsed 2 months earlier because they'd had to choose between premiums and Lily's medication that month. There was no lawsuit, no settlement, no justice that came with a check. Just a funeral Marcus paid for by working triple shifts, and a grief so vast he still sometimes forgot how to breathe. He walked back to the kitchen and stared at the coins, swept them into a jar with hands that wanted to shake but couldn't. Not anymore, not after 3 years of practice. From the closet near the door, he pulled out Camilla's winter coat, the green one she'd worn the morning she left for what would be her last shift. He brought it to his face and inhaled, searching for any remaining trace of her perfume, that vanilla and jasmine scent she'd saved up to buy herself each Christmas. The smell had faded months ago, but he kept checking anyway, kept hoping some molecules might have survived, might offer proof that she'd existed in this physical world and not just in the photographs that were already starting to feel like memories of memories. Marcus hung the coat back up and checked the clock. 5:30 in the morning. In an hour, he needed to wake Lily and start the morning routine. Cereal with milk that would expire tomorrow, the pills she had to take with food, the careful monitoring of her energy levels to judge whether this would be a good day or a bad day. Then Mrs. Brennan from next door would come over to walk Lily to school because Marcus's shift at the Golden Oak started at 11 and ran until midnight most days. He pulled the eviction notice from his dresser and read it again, even though he'd memorized every word. 30 days. Mr. Kowalski, the landlord, had been patient. Marcus was 2 months behind on rent, $3,200 in arrears, and Kowalski had a mortgage to pay and a grandson with medical bills of his own. The old man had apologized when he taped the notice to the door, had actually apologized, which somehow made it worse. Beside the eviction notice lay the hospital bill. Marcus unfolded it slowly, the paper worn soft from repeated handling. St. Francis Hospital, $87,000 in outstanding charges. The insurance he got through the Golden Oak was catastrophic coverage only, the kind that kicked in after the first $100,000. Useful for keeping you from complete bankruptcy, but useless for everything below that threshold where most people lived and died. Dr. Patricia Chen had been gentle when she explained the surgery Lily needed. Gentle and direct, which Marcus appreciated because he was tired of people treating him like he couldn't handle the truth. The mitral valve in Lily's heart wasn't closing properly. Blood was leaking backward with every beat, forcing her heart to work harder and harder to pump enough oxygenated blood through her small body. Without surgical repair, she had maybe 6 months before the damage became irreversible. With surgery, she could live a normal life, run and play, and grow up to worry about normal things like math homework and first crushes and what college to attend. The surgery cost $145,000. Insurance would cover 40%. Marcus needed to find $87,000, which was more than he'd earned in the past 3 years combined. More than he could imagine earning in the next 3 years, even if he worked every available shift and never slept and never ate. Chen had slipped to him a pamphlet about financial assistance programs, her eyes kind and sad. He'd looked at the waitlist information later. 14 to 18 months. Lily didn't have 18 months. Marcus folded the bill and the eviction notice together and put them back in the drawer, closing it firmly like that might contain the problems, keep them from spreading into the rest of his life. He made coffee using yesterday's grounds because new grounds were a luxury and coffee was a necessity. The bitter liquid burned his tongue, but the pain felt clarifying, a sharp point of sensation to anchor him in the present moment. At 6:15, he woke Lily gently, helped her into her school clothes, and watched her eat cereal one slow spoonful at a time. She tired easily even from the small act of chewing and swallowing. He hid his face while he washed the dishes so she wouldn't see the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes burned with exhaustion and fear, and the particular rage that came from being powerless to save your own child. Mrs. Brennan knocked at 7:30, punctual as always. She was 73, Polish, with iron gray hair and the kind of firm kindness that expected no thanks. She'd raised 4 children as a widow after her husband died in Vietnam, and she watched Lily for $20 a day, which was below minimum wage but all Marcus could afford. Some days he suspected she didn't cash his checks, but she never said anything, and he never asked because they'd both agreed without speaking that Lily's dignity mattered more than acknowledging certain truths. "You look terrible," Mrs. Brennan said when he opened the door, her accent still thick despite 50 years in Charleston. "You're working too much." Marcus tried to smile. "I'm fine." "You're not fine, you're dying slowly." She pushed past him into the apartment, already pulling on her reading glasses to check Lily's pill organizer. "This is almost empty. When's the refill?" "5 days." Mrs. Brennan's eyes found his face, and whatever she saw there made her mouth tighten. She didn't say anything else, just nodded once and turned to call Lily. Marcus kissed his daughter goodbye, promised he'd be home by bedtime even though he knew he'd be late, and watched them walk down the hallway toward the stairs. Lily turned back once to wave, her smile bright and trusting, and Marcus waved back until they disappeared around the corner. Then he got ready for work. The Golden Oak occupied a converted mansion in Charleston's historic district, all white columns and black shutters, and the kind of carefully maintained elegance that whispered old money to anyone who knew how to listen. Marcus had been working there for 3 years, ever since Camilla died, and he needed more hours than the casual restaurant work he'd been doing before. Glenn Patterson, the floor manager, had hired him because Marcus was good at being invisible, at anticipating needs before customers knew they needed anything, at absorbing insults with a neutral face and making rich people feel like their wealth entitled them to perfect service. Marcus was good at his job because he had to be, because being good at his job meant keeping his job, meant keeping Lily fed and housed and medicated for another day. He arrived at the Golden Oak at 10:45 and changed into his uniform in the cramped staff bathroom. White shirt, black pants, black shoes that pinched his toes, a thin black tie that Camilla had given him years ago when he'd first started waiting tables. The shirt had a coffee stain on the collar that never quite washed out no matter how much he scrubbed. He tried replacing it, but the uniform shirts cost $40 each, and he kept finding more urgent places for $40 to go. The kitchen smelled like butter and wine, and the particular kind of excess that came from reduction sauces made with ingredients that cost more per ounce than Marcus made per hour. Ray Chen, the head chef, was already shouting at the line cooks in that way that sounded angry, but actually meant everything was running smoothly. Ray was 45, built like a linebacker, and one of the few people at the Golden Oak who treated Marcus like an actual human being. "Rivera," Ray called when Marcus walked past the line. "Hang on a second." Marcus stopped, and Ray handed him a plastic container. Inside was chicken parmesan, enough for 2 servings. "Extras from last night," Ray said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "Gonna go bad if someone doesn't eat it." They both knew there were no extras, that Ray had made this specifically for Marcus and Lily, that this had happened at least once a week for the past 2 years. Marcus's throat went tight. "Thanks, Ray." Ray waved him off, already turning back to his mise en place. Yeah, get out there before Glenn has a stroke." The front of house was a different world from the kitchen. Soft lighting from crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths with knife-edge creases, chairs upholstered in leather that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Vanessa Cole, the hostess, stood at her podium wearing a dress that hugged her figure and a smile that never reached her eyes. She was 28, beautiful in that calculated way that required effort and money, and she'd made it clear within Marcus's first week that she considered him beneath her notice. "Table 7 needs water," she said without looking at him, "and try not to look so miserable today. You're killing the ambiance." Marcus filled water glasses and set tables and polished silverware until it gleamed. The lunch shift started at 11:30 with the early crowd, business lunches, ladies who lunched, tourists willing to pay $50 for a salad they could photograph for social media. Marcus moved through his section efficiently, invisibly, his face arranged in an expression of attentive neutrality. At 2:15, Glenn called him into the cramped office behind the kitchen. Glenn was 50 years old, graying at the temples, with the perpetually worried expression of someone who knew his job existed at the whim of people who could replace him without thought. He'd been a decent manager once, Marcus suspected, before the Golden Oak ground him down into someone who chose self-preservation over principles. Glenn's face told Marcus this wasn't a social call. "Close the door," Glenn said, and Marcus's stomach dropped. The office was barely large enough for Glenn's desk and 2 chairs. The walls were covered in schedules and inventory lists and photographs of the Golden Oak's most distinguished customers, local politicians, minor celebrities. the kind of people whose patronage kept the restaurant profitable. Glenn folded his hands on the desk, suddenly fascinated by his own knuckles. I need you on table 9 tonight. Table 9 was the corner booth, the one with the best view of the garden, the one they reserved for VIPs. Marcus had only worked table 9 a handful of times, always under strict instructions not to screw up. Who is it? Marcus asked, though part of him already knew, already felt the weight of inevitable disaster settling on his shoulders. Victoria Blackwell. The name landed in the small office like a stone in still water. Everyone in Charleston knew Victoria Blackwell. She owned Blackwell Properties, one of the largest commercial real estate companies in the Southeast. Her face appeared regularly in Charleston Magazine, usually at charity galas where she wrote checks large enough to buy naming rights to hospital wings. She sat on the boards of half the cultural institutions in the city. She could end careers with a phone call, destroy reputations with a word to the right person. Glenn's voice went quieter, more urgent. She requested our best service. I'm putting you on her table because you're the best server I have. But Marcus, I need you to understand, you cannot make a mistake tonight. Nothing, not a forgotten water refill, not a delayed course, nothing. She's been unhappy with the last few times she's been in. If we screw up again, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Glenn noticed anyway, his face tightening with disapproval. Marcus silenced the phone without checking who'd called. I understand, Marcus said. I'll take care of it. Glenn looked like he wanted to say something else, but whatever it was died behind his teeth. He waved Marcus out of the office, and Marcus went back to setting up his section for the dinner shift, his mind already running through the protocols for VIP service. The extra attention to timing, the careful balance between attentive and intrusive, the absolute invisibility of perfect service. His phone buzzed again. This time Marcus checked it. 2 missed calls from Magnolia Elementary School, 1 voicemail. His hands went cold as he stepped into the hallway near the bathrooms and listened to the message. Ms. Parker, Lily's teacher, her voice carefully neutral in that way that meant something had gone wrong. Mr. Rivera, this is Ashley Parker from Magnolia Elementary. Lily had a fainting episode during art class today. She says she's fine, but I think you should know. She's resting in the nurse's office right now. She didn't want me to call you because she said you're busy at work. Please call me back when you get a chance. Marcus's vision tunneled. The hallway seemed to tilt. He called Ms. Parker back immediately, his finger slipping twice on the screen before he managed to dial. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Rivera? Is she okay? Did you call an ambulance? The words tumbled out faster than he could organize them. She's okay, resting. She didn't want us to call an ambulance. Ms. Parker's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. She was very insistent that she was fine, that this happens sometimes. Mr. Rivera, does this happen sometimes? Marcus leaned against the wall, feeling the cool plaster against his forehead. She has a heart condition. She gets tired easily. Did she lose consciousness completely? For about 30 seconds, she was sitting down when it happened, so she didn't fall. Mr. Rivera, I really think I'll be there in 20 minutes. Actually, Mrs. Brennan already came to pick her up. She said she'd take Lily home and stay with her until you finish work. Mrs. Brennan, of course. She must have been listed as an emergency contact. Marcus felt a rush of gratitude so intense it hurt. Thank you, he managed. Thank you for calling. He ended the call and stood in the hallway, trying to remember how to breathe. Friday afternoon, 5:30. Dinner service started at 6. Glenn would be seating guests already. Marcus had exactly 2 choices: go home to Lily or stay here and keep his job. If he left now, Glenn would fire him. Not because Glenn was cruel, but because the Golden Oak operated on thin margins and zero tolerance for unreliability. Marcus could be replaced. There were 50 competent servers in Charleston who would kill for his position. If he stayed, he might earn enough in tips tonight to cover the rest of Lily's medication. Maybe more if Victoria Blackwell was feeling generous. He had 5 days until the prescription needed refilling. If he got fired, he had no days. Marcus called Mrs. Brennan. She answered immediately, and he could hear Lily's voice in the background, small but steady, telling Mrs. Brennan she was fine. Really, just tired. I'll be there as soon as my shift ends, Marcus said. Can you stay with her? Of course I stay. Don't worry, she's eating soup now, watching her cartoons. You work. We're fine here. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he'd come home anyway, that his daughter mattered more than any job. But Mrs. Brennan would know that was a lie. She'd seen the eviction notice. She'd watched Marcus count coins. She understood the arithmetic of survival. Thank you, he whispered. Stop thanking me. Go make your money. She hung up, and Marcus stood in the hallway for 30 more seconds, allowing in himself that small space to feel the weight of it. The fear, the inadequacy, the searing guilt of being a father who had to choose between earning rent and sitting beside his sick child. Then he pushed it all down into the locked box where he kept everything that might show on his face, and he walked back onto the floor. At 7:15, Victoria Blackwell arrived. She moved through the Golden Oaks entrance like she'd purchased the building that morning and was conducting a surprise inspection. 52 years old, blonde hair styled in a way that looked effortless but required bi-weekly salon appointments. Wearing a black dress that Marcus recognized from a window display at the boutique on King Street, where price tags came in the form of discreet consultations. Her heels clicked on the marble floor with metronomic precision. She didn't glance around to get her bearings because she already knew exactly where she belonged. Behind her came three other women, similarly dressed, similarly composed, moving in formation like a small military unit. Marcus recognized them from previous visits. Charleston society women, whose names appeared in the social pages, whose husbands ran law firms and banks and the kind of family businesses that had survived the Civil War and Reconstruction and every economic collapse since. Vanessa greeted them with a deference that bordered on worship, leading them to table 9, while a busboy practically sprinted ahead to ensure their water glasses were filled before they sat down. Marcus hung back, observing, waiting for Vanessa's signal. She caught his eye and gave him a look that clearly communicated, "Don't screw this up. You're beneath these people. If you embarrass me, I'll make sure Glenn fires you." Marcus approached this table with his professional smile firmly in place, the one that conveyed attentive service without presuming familiarity. Victoria Blackwell was already studying the wine list, one perfectly manicured finger tracking down the page. "Good evening, ladies. Welcome to the Golden Oak." Marcus's voice came out steady, practiced, empty of anything that might be interpreted as personality. "May I start you with something to drink?" Victoria didn't look up from the wine list. The other women were deep in conversation about someone named Patricia, who'd apparently made a social error at last week's gallery opening. Marcus stood with his hands folded, waiting, his face neutral, his spine straight despite the ache that never fully left. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice carrying the particular authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Chateau Margaux, 2005. Bottle." Marcus wrote it down, $920 for a bottle of wine. He did the mental math automatically. That was more than half his monthly rent, more than 3 weeks of groceries, more than Lily's medication copay. He kept his expression unchanged. "Excellent choice. I'll bring that right out." He turned to leave, but the front door opened again. A young man entered, hesitant, shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to make himself smaller. Early 20s, thin, dark hair falling across his forehead, wearing a jacket that didn't quite fit properly, in jeans instead of the dress pants that would have been more appropriate for the Golden Oaks atmosphere. He kept his eyes on the floor as he navigated between tables, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who wasn't sure he belonged. Victoria's head snapped up, her expression shifting from neutral to cold in the space of a heartbeat. Jordan. Not honey or sweetheart, just his name, flat and sharp as a command. The young man, Jordan, walked to table 9 and slid into the seat at the far end of the booth, as far from his mother as the table's configuration allowed. He still hadn't looked up. His hands moved in small, restless patterns against his thighs, and Marcus noticed the way his eyes tracked to people's mouths when they spoke, the way his whole body seemed tuned to visual information. Recognition settled in Marcus's chest with the weight of the old grief. He'd seen those signs before. Ms. Parker had a student in her class who was deaf, and she'd explained to the parents during open house how to communicate effectively, how to position yourself in someone's line of sight, how to speak clearly without exaggerating your mouth movements. Jordan was deaf. Marcus felt something shift in his perspective, a sudden acute awareness of the isolation radiating from the young man who sat among his mother's friends, but might as well have been on another planet. The women's conversation continued without pause, their lips moving rapidly, their heads turned away from Jordan as they laughed about something Marcus didn't catch. He retrieved the wine from the cellar, checked the vintage and temperature, and brought it to the table with the proper ceremony. Victoria tasted it, nodded her approval without looking at him, and Marcus poured for the table. The other women accepted their glasses with the casual entitlement of people for whom $900 wine was a regular Tuesday. Jordan sat with his hands in his lap, staring at the menu. Marcus stepped closer, careful to position himself in Jordan's line of sight. When Jordan finally looked up, Marcus met his eyes and spoke slowly, clearly, without exaggeration. "What would you like to order?" Something flashed across Jordan's face, surprise, maybe relief. His eyes widened slightly. For a moment his hands lifted, fingers beginning to form shapes in the air, the start of sign language. Then he stopped, his gaze flickering to his mother, and his hands curled into fists. He pointed at something on the menu instead. Marcus nodded. "The salmon, good choice, I'll make sure it's prepared perfectly." Jordan's shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, tension releasing. His eyes said thank you, even though his voice didn't. Marcus was turning away when Victoria's voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "What are you doing?" He stopped, turned back. "I was taking your son's order, ma'am." Victoria's laugh was sharp and performative, designed to be heard. Her friends immediately stopped their own conversation, attention swiveling to whatever entertainment Victoria was about to provide. "Did you hear that?" Victoria looked at her companions, her smile cold. "The waiter thinks he can communicate with my son." The other women tittered, a practiced chorus of support. One of them, Meredith something, Marcus remembered her name from previous visits, leaned forward with theatrical interest. Victoria's voice rose, ensuring nearby tables could hear. "Tell me, do they teach sign language in waiter school? Or are you just pretending to understand disabilities?" Marcus felt heat crawl up his neck, felt his jaw clench. The restaurant had gone quiet, other diners turning to watch. He saw Vanessa at the hostess stand, her face sharp with warning. He saw Glenn emerging from the kitchen, already moving toward the table with his conflict resolution face firmly in place. Marcus thought about Lily, about the medication running out in 5 days, about the $12.37 in his checking account, about the eviction notice and the hospital bills, and the choice he'd made 3 hours ago to stay here instead of going home to his sick daughter. He lowered his eyes. "My apologies, ma'am. I'll bring your meals out shortly." He walked toward the kitchen, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind him, Victoria's voice continued, something about people not knowing their place, about having to tolerate incompetence. Her friends laughed, the sound following Marcus through the dining room like small stones. But before he reached the kitchen doors, he turned back for just a moment. Jordan sat with his face toward his plate, red patches high on his cheeks, hands clenched so tightly on the edge of the table that his knuckles had gone white. His whole body seemed to be folding in on itself, trying to disappear, trying to escape his own visibility. Marcus knew that posture, had worn it himself countless times. The shape of someone who'd been made small for so long, they'd forgotten they were supposed to take up space. He pushed through the kitchen doors, into the noise and heat and controlled chaos of service, leaned against the stainless steel counter and counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3, 2. Ray glanced over from the grill, read Marcus's face, and didn't say anything. Just went back to his Meissen place, letting Marcus have the space to reassemble himself. Marcus loaded the orders onto a tray, filet mignon for Victoria, salmon for Jordan, sea bass and lamb chops for the others. Each plate was a small work of art, garnished with microgreens and reduction sauces in the kind of precision that justified $60 price tags. He stared at the food and thought about Lily eating cereal for breakfast because they'd run out of eggs, thought about Mrs. Brennan bringing soup, thought about the $4.99 coloring book his daughter wanted. Then he picked up the tray and carried it back out. The dining room had returned to its normal volume, conversations resuming, the earlier entertainment forgotten. Marcus set the plates down one by one, starting with Victoria as protocol demanded. She didn't acknowledge him, too busy describing a property acquisition in the Marina District, her voice loud with the confidence of someone who'd never been ignored in her life. He moved to Jordan's side of the table and placed the salmon carefully. Jordan glanced up, and for just a moment their eyes met. Marcus saw gratitude there, and sadness, and something else, a kind of desperate loneliness that made Marcus's chest constrict. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" Marcus asked the table generally, his voice carefully neutral. Victoria waved him away without looking. "We're fine." Marcus turned to leave, but a sound stopped him. Quiet, almost inaudible under the restaurant's ambient noise. He looked back and saw Jordan's lips moving, forming words that had no voice behind them. The young man stared at his plate, hands gripping the table edge, his whole body rigid with some internal struggle. Victoria noticed. Her expression hardened. "Jordan, sit up straight." Jordan didn't move. His shoulders hunched forward even more, his head dropping lower. One of Victoria's friends, Carolyn, the gallery owner, leaned in with false concern painting her features. "Is he all right?" Victoria's laugh was bitter, exhausted. "He's fine. He just doesn't know how to behave in public." She said it loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear, said it with the casual cruelty of someone commenting on a disappointing purchase. Marcus felt something twist in his gut, felt his hands start to shake with an anger he couldn't afford to feel. Jordan looked up then, and Marcus saw tears gathering in the young man's eyes, saw shame and hurt and the particular devastation of being humiliated by your own mother in front of strangers. Marcus thought about Lily asking if he was sad, thought about her trusting smile, thought about Camilla's voice from 3 years ago. "I don't want Lily growing up watching her father stay silent when something's wrong. If you don't teach her how to stand up, the world will teach her how to stay down." Camilla had died because she'd stayed silent about being too exhausted to drive safely. Died because she was afraid to ask for help, afraid to admit weakness, afraid that speaking up would cost her the job they needed to survive. Marcus had watched his wife's casket lower into the ground and promised himself he'd never make that mistake again. But he'd been making it every day since, staying silent because speaking up was a luxury he couldn't afford, because survival required swallowing your pride and your anger and your sense that the world was fundamentally unjust. He looked at Jordan, then at Victoria, then back at Jordan, and he stepped forward. His voice came out steady, clear, carrying across the now silent dining room. "Excuse me." Victoria's head snapped toward him, irritation flashing across her face. "What now?" Marcus met her eyes and didn't look away, didn't flinch, didn't lower his gaze the way she clearly expected. "Your son tried to tell you something. Maybe you should listen." The silence that followed felt absolute. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade. Marcus was aware of every eye in the restaurant turning toward them, aware of Vanessa's sharp intake of breath, aware of Glenn frozen halfway across the floor. Victoria's expression shifted from irritation to disbelief to something colder and more dangerous. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor, the sound loud in the silence. She was taller than Marcus had realized, or maybe she just knew how to use height as a weapon. Her voice came out low and venomous. "I'm sorry, did you just tell me how to speak to my son?" Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to apologize, to back down, to remember the eviction notice and the hospital bills and the medication running out in 5 days. But he thought about Lily's question, "Are you sad, Daddy?" And he thought about what kind of man he wanted his daughter to see when she looked at him. "I'm saying maybe he deserves to be heard." Victoria took a step closer, invading his space, using her presence like a physical threat. "You have no idea who you're talking to." Marcus held his ground. "I know exactly who I'm talking to." One of Victoria's friends gasped. Another reached for her phone, the screen lighting up as she angled it toward them. Marcus could see the red recording indicator, could see this moment being captured and preserved and about to be broadcast to however many followers this woman had. Victoria's face flushed red. "You're a waiter, a nobody. You think you can stand here and lecture me about my son?" Marcus felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. He forced himself to breathe, forced himself to stay calm, even as rage and fear and 3 years of swallowed pride churned in his chest. The words came out quiet but clear. I think you're so busy being powerful that you forgot what it's like to be kind. The statement hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her friend sat frozen, the moment crystallizing into something that would replay in social circles for weeks. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper, but somehow that made it more terrifying. You're fired. The ground shifted under Marcus's feet. The room tilted. He thought about Lily, about Mrs. Brennan watching her right now, about 5 days until the medication ran out, about 30 days until eviction, about $87,000 he'd never be able to earn. But then he looked at Jordan, and the young man was staring at him with wide eyes, mouth slightly open, and Marcus saw something in that expression that looked like hope. Then I'm fired. The silence pressed down like physical weight. Victoria's smile turned cruel. Victorious. You'll never work in Charleston again. I'll make sure of it. Marcus didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He'd thrown away everything, his guam, his ability to pay rent, his daughter's medication, for the sake of telling this woman that her cruelty had consequences. Part of him wanted to take it back, to grovel and beg, and somehow undo the past 2 minutes. But then something unexpected happened. Jordan stood up. The movement was sudden, jerky, like someone breaking free of restraints they'd worn so long they'd forgotten what freedom felt like. He looked at his mother, and his face wasn't filled with shame anymore. It was filled with anger. The word came out rough, unpracticed, but loud enough. Stop! Victoria turned to him, stunned. Jordan, sit down. Jordan shook his head. His hands were trembling, but he didn't sit. He looked at Marcus, then back at his mother, and when he spoke again, his voice was stronger, clearer, each word deliberate. I'm deaf, Mom, not broken. The restaurant erupted, not in laughter this time, but in a low murmur that spread like wildfire. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered. The phones came out, recording lights blinking like red stars. Victoria's face went pale. Her mouth worked, but no sound emerged. Jordan's voice gained strength. I've been silent for 20 years because you told me I had to be strong. But I'm not weak. You're weak. You can't love your own son the right way. Someone started clapping, slow at first, hesitant, but then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was applauding, the sound building into a wave that crashed over them all. Jordan looked at Marcus, tears streaming down his face, but he was smiling. A small, fragile smile that looked like the first sunrise after a long winter. Then he walked past his mother, past the table, past the staring diners, and out the door. Victoria grabbed her purse with shaking hands, her face twisted with rage and something that might have been shame. She looked at Marcus, and her voice came out as a hiss. You're done, you hear me? Done. She stormed out, her friends scrambling after her, their heels clicking rapidly against the marble. The door swung shut, and the applause continued, swelling, filling the space where violence had been. Marcus stood in the center of it all, the tray still in his hands, and he didn't feel victorious. He felt numb, terrified. He'd just destroyed his life to defend a stranger, and while the applause suggested people thought he was some kind of hero, heroes didn't have daughters who needed medication in 5 days. Glenn appeared at his elbow, face grim. My office, now. Marcus followed him through the kitchen, past Ray and the line cooks who watched with expressions mixing awe and pity. Glenn's office was cramped and cluttered, barely room for the desk and 2 chairs. The manager closed the door and turned to face Marcus. What the hell were you thinking? Glenn's voice was quiet, exhausted. Marcus couldn't answer. His throat felt tight. He stared at the floor, his mind already racing ahead to how he'd tell Lily they had to move, how he'd explain that Daddy lost his job, how he'd somehow find the money for her medication. Glenn rubbed his face with both hands. You know who that was? Victoria Blackwell owns half the commercial real estate in this city. She could destroy us with one phone call. He paused. She was humiliating her son. Glenn's voice softened. I know. I saw it. Silence filled the small space, heavy with everything unsaid. So you're firing me, Marcus said. Not a question. Glenn didn't answer immediately. He just looked at Marcus, his face unreadable, and Marcus recognized the expression, the look of someone who hated what they had to do but would do it anyway because survival required hard choices. I don't have a choice. The owner already called. He's terrified she'll write something on social media that we'll lose our reputation. That Glenn stopped, took a breath. Take your things. I'll mail your final check. Marcus stood, legs somehow still working, despite feeling like they'd been cut off at the knees. He walked to the door, hand on the knob. Glenn's voice stopped him. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Marcus didn't respond. Right and wrong seemed like concepts from a different universe. One where doing the right thing didn't mean your daughter might die because you couldn't afford her medication. He went to his locker, grabbed his jacket and the container of chicken parmesan Ray had given him earlier, and walked out through the back exit into the October night. The air was cold against his face. He stood in the alley behind the golden oak, breathing hard, his hands shaking now that there was no one to see. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Mrs. Brennan saying Lily was asking for him, that she was okay, just missing her daddy. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the weight of everything pressing down. The job was gone. The apartment would be gone in 30 days. Lily's medication would run out in 5 days. The hospital bills were still waiting. Dr. Chen's gentle voice echoed in his memory. Without surgery, she has maybe 6 months. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Marcus ignored it, started walking. 40 minutes on foot to get home because he couldn't afford an Uber, and the buses had stopped running this late. He passed through Charleston's downtown, past shop windows displaying things he'd never be able to buy. The toy store with the $4.99 coloring book. The pharmacy where Lily's medication waited behind the counter. The grocery store where he bought cereal and milk and the cheapest cuts of meat. His phone kept buzzing, more unknown numbers. Marcus silenced it completely and kept walking. He didn't know that at 11:47 p.m., Vanessa had uploaded a video to TikTok. Didn't know the caption read, "Server stands up to entitled billionaire at Charleston restaurant, have justice served, had deaf awareness." Didn't know that by midnight the video had 50,000 views. By 1 a.m. it had 200,000. By 2 a.m. it was trending nationwide. Marcus arrived home at 12:30, let himself in quietly, and found Mrs. Brennan dozing on the couch. She woke immediately, her sharp eyes taking in his face. "You look worse than before," she said. Marcus pulled out his wallet, counted out $20, handed it to her even though it left him with almost nothing. "Thank you for staying." Mrs. Brennan looked at the money, then at his face, and he saw pity there, which was worse than anything Victoria had said. "Marcus, please," he whispered. "I can't. Just please." She nodded, squeezed his arm once, and left. Marcus locked the door and checked on Lily. She was asleep, her chest rising and falling in that irregular rhythm that never quite seemed normal. The stuffed rabbit clutched tight against her. He stood in the doorway and watched her breathe, counting each inhale like prayer beads. Then he went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and pulled out his laptop. Checked his bank account, $12.37. Opened the calculator and did the math one more time, even though he knew what the numbers would say. Rent due in 28 days, medication needed in 5 days. No job, no prospects. The laptop chimed with an email notification. Marcus almost closed it, but the subject line caught his eye. "You've been mentioned in a GoFundMe campaign." He clicked, confused. The page loaded slowly. Title: Support Marcus Rivera, the waiter who stood up. Created by Anonymous. Description: Marcus Rivera is a single father working as a waiter in Charleston, SC. Last night he lost his job defending a deaf young man from public humiliation. According to reports, Marcus has a 7-year-old daughter with a heart condition requiring surgery. He was facing eviction before losing his job. Let's show Marcus that courage shouldn't cost everything. Goal, $50,000. Current amount, $28,000, raised in 18 hours. Marcus stared at the screen, not comprehending. $28,000. He scrolled through the donations, reading the messages. $5. Thank you for showing my son his voice matters. 20. My daughter is deaf. This made me cry. 100. You stood up when no one else would. $500. I was a single parent once. I know how hard it is. 50. For Lily's surgery, get that baby healthy. The messages kept going. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, from complete strangers who knew nothing about him except what they'd seen in a 60-second video. Marcus read every single one, tears streaming down his face, unable to process the fact that people who owed him nothing were giving him everything. His laptop screen blurred. He closed it, pressed his palms against his eyes, and tried to understand this feeling. Not quite hope, not yet, but something close. The opposite of the despair that had been his constant companion for 3 years. A small voice from the doorway. Daddy, why are you crying? Marcus looked up to see Lily standing there, the stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand, her hair mussed from sleep. He opened his arms and she climbed into his lap, tucking her head under his chin. I'm not sad, sweetheart, he whispered into her hair. People are just very, very kind. Lily was quiet for a moment, then, did something happen at work? Marcus thought about how to answer that, how to explain that he'd lost his job and maybe saved his soul, that strangers were giving them money because he'd stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for himself, that the world was more complicated and more beautiful than he'd been allowing himself to believe. Yes, baby, something happened, something big. Lily pulled back to look at his face, studying him with those eyes that saw too much. Good big or bad big? Marcus managed a smile. I think both, but maybe more good than bad. She seemed satisfied with that answer, snuggling back against his chest. Her heart beat irregular and wrong against his ribs, and Marcus held her tighter, thinking about the $28,000, about the surgery that could fix her, about the medication running out in 5 days. One problem at a time. That's all he could handle. One problem at a time. He carried Lily back to bed, tucked her in, and sat beside her until she fell back asleep. Then he returned to his laptop and stared at the GoFundMe page, watching the number climb in real time. 28,500. 29,000. The donations kept coming, messages kept appearing, strangers kept choosing to help. Marcus opened a new browser tab and searched his own name. The video was everywhere: TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, millions of views, thousands of comments, people calling him a hero, calling Victoria a monster, calling for boycotts and consequences and justice. He watched the video once, saw himself standing up to Victoria, saw the look on Jordan's face when the young man finally spoke, saw the applause, saw his own fired. The person in the video looked braver than Marcus felt, looked like someone who knew what he was doing instead of someone barely holding on. The view count kept climbing. 2 million, 3 million, 5 million. Marcus closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum and the pipes knock and the distant sound of traffic on Meeting Street. He thought about Camilla, about what she would have said about all this. She would have been proud, he thought. Proud that he'd finally stopped staying silent. Proud that he'd chosen dignity over survival, even if just for one moment. But she would also have been terrified, because she'd understood better than anyone that dignity didn't pay for medication or rent or the 1,000 daily necessities that kept a child alive. Marcus pulled out his phone and checked the time. 2:15 a.m. In less than 3 hours, Lily would wake up and he'd have to make her breakfast and tell her, what? That daddy lost his job, but it was okay because strangers on the internet were giving them money? That sometimes doing the right thing meant destroying everything you'd worked for. But maybe that was okay because at least you could look at yourself in the mirror. He didn't have answers. He just had the $29,000 on a GoFundMe page and 5 days until Lily's medication ran out, and the image of Jordan's face when the young man finally used his voice. Marcus's phone buzzed one more time. A message request on Facebook from someone named Jordan Blackwell. He opened it. Mr. Rivera, I'm Jordan from the restaurant. I wanted to thank you for what you did. You reminded me that my voice matters. Can we meet? Marcus stared at the message for a long time, his finger hovering over the keyboard. Then he typed, "Of course. When and where?" He sent the message and sat back, watching the screen. Three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Jordan was typing. The response came through. "Broad Awakening coffee, and tomorrow at 7 p.m.?" Marcus confirmed, then set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. At the peeling paint and the cracked window and the furniture he'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. At the photograph of Camilla on the refrigerator, smiling in the summer dress she'd loved. At the closed door to Lily's room where his daughter slept with her broken heart and her trusting smile. He'd done something tonight that couldn't be undone. Had stepped across a line that you couldn't step back over. For better or worse, his life had changed, and Lily's life had changed. And somewhere in this city, a young man named Jordan was probably lying awake in his own darkness, processing the fact that he'd finally spoken after 20 years of silence. Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt exhausted and terrified and strangely unburdened, like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. The dawn was still hours away. Marcus made himself a bed on the couch, too wired to sleep, but too tired to do anything else. He closed his eyes and listened to Lily breathe in the next room, that irregular rhythm that was both his greatest fear and his reason for continuing to exist. Somewhere out there, the video was still spreading. The donations were still coming in. Jordan was probably awake too, processing his own transformation. Victoria Blackwell was likely pacing in her expensive home, planning revenge or damage control or whatever powerful people did when their cruelty got broadcast to millions of strangers. But in this moment, in this small apartment that he'd probably lose in 30 days, Marcus allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in 3 years. The possibility that things might actually change. Not magically, not without struggle, but change nonetheless. The kind that came from speaking up instead of staying silent, from choosing dignity even when survival demanded compromise. He thought about what he'd tell Lily in the morning, how he'd explain that sometimes doing the right thing looked like losing, but maybe that was how winning actually worked, not by avoiding all consequences, but by choosing which consequences you could live with. Marcus fell asleep on the couch as gray light began filtering through the cracked window, the GoFundMe page still open on his laptop, the donations still climbing, strangers still choosing kindness for reasons he'd probably never fully understand. And in his dreams, Camilla smiled and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say that the silence couldn't express better. Marcus woke to the sound of his phone vibrating against the coffee table, a persistent buzz that dragged him up from dreams he couldn't remember. The living room was bright with morning sun, and for a disoriented moment, he couldn't understand why he was on the couch instead of in bed. Then memory crashed back. The restaurant, Victoria, Jordan, Glenn's office, the long walk home, the firing. He grabbed his phone and the screen showed 87 missed calls, 156 text messages. His email app badge displayed a number so high it had switched to 200 plus. Every notification was from a number or name he didn't recognize, and the phone kept buzzing in his hand, new messages arriving faster than he could process. Marcus sat up, his back protesting from a night on the lumpy couch. Through the thin wall, he could hear Lily stirring in her bedroom, the soft sounds of her waking up. He had maybe 5 minutes before she came out, 5 minutes to figure out what he was going to tell his daughter about why her father was home on a Saturday morning when he should have been sleeping after a late shift. He opened the messaging app and scrolled through the flood. Most were from journalists, local news stations, newspapers, someone claiming to be from Good Morning America. Others were from people offering support, strangers who'd seen the video and wanted him to know they were on his side. A few were angry messages calling him an attention seeker, accusing him of staging the whole thing for views. The bedroom door opened and Lily emerged, her hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. She rubbed her eyes and squinted at him in the bright living room. Her voice came out small and confused. "Daddy, why are you home?" Marcus set his phone face down on the table and held out his arms. Lily shuffled over and climbed into his lap, still warm and soft from sleep. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I got the morning off," he said, which was true in the most technical sense. "How are you feeling, baby?" Lily's hand went to her chest, an automatic gesture she probably didn't even realize she made anymore. Okay, a little tired. Mrs. Brennan made me chicken soup last night. It was good. Guilt twisted in Marcus's stomach. He'd chosen to stay at work instead of coming home when his daughter fainted, had prioritized keeping his job over being there, and then he'd lost the job anyway through his own actions. I'm glad she took good care of you. Marcus smoothed Lily's hair, trying to tame the chaos. Are you hungry? I can make breakfast. Can we have pancakes? Marcus thought about the nearly empty kitchen, the lack of eggs and milk and butter. But he had the chicken parmesan Ray had given him, and maybe he could figure something out. How about I make us something special with what we have, okay? Lily nodded, content with this vague promise, and Marcus carried her to the kitchen. He set her down at the table and was pulling open the refrigerator when he heard it, his own voice coming from the living room. Lily had picked up the TV remote. Marcus rushed back to find the local news on screen, a morning anchor with perfect hair and a concerned expression. The footage showed the Golden Oak, then cut to the video that Vanessa had recorded. Marcus watched himself confront Victoria, watched Jordan stand up and speak, watched the restaurant erupt in applause. The anchor's voice carried over the footage. The video, posted last night, has already been viewed over 2 million times. Many are calling it a powerful moment of standing up to privilege and defending those who can't defend themselves. Victoria Blackwell, prominent Charleston real estate developer, has not responded to requests for comment. We reached out to the Golden Oak, but management declined to discuss the incident. Lily stared at the screen, then turned to look at Marcus with wide eyes. Daddy, that's you. Marcus grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. The sudden silence felt oppressive. He knelt down beside Lily's chair, trying to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old, trying to explain something he barely understood himself. Yeah, baby, that's me. Something happened at work last night. A customer was being mean to her son, and I said she shouldn't do that. Lily processed this information with the seriousness she brought to everything important. Was he sad? Yeah, I think he was very sad. Did you make him feel better? Marcus thought about Jordan's face when he'd finally spoken, about the tears and the smile mixed together. I hope so, sweetheart. I tried. Lily nodded, satisfied with this explanation in a way that adults would never be. She slid off her chair and hugged Marcus around the neck, her small arms surprisingly strong. You're a good daddy, she whispered against his shoulder. Marcus held her tight and felt his throat close up. If he was such a good daddy, why had he just destroyed their financial stability? Why had he chosen a stranger over his own daughter's security? The questions chased each other in circles, unanswerable. He made breakfast from the chicken parmesan, reheating it and serving it over the last of the bread. Lily ate slowly, methodically, and Marcus watched each bite, monitoring her energy levels. She seemed okay today. Not great, but okay, which was the best he could hope for most days. His phone buzzed again. Marcus ignored it. Then it buzzed 3 more times in rapid succession, and Lily looked up with curious eyes. Someone really wants to talk to you, she observed. Marcus checked the screen. The most recent message was from Jordan Blackwell, confirming their meeting tonight. Before that was a text from an unknown number. Mr. Rivera, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We'd love to interview you. We can offer compensation. Compensation. Money. Marcus's finger hovered over the message. Tempted. How much would a local news interview pay? Enough for Lily's medication? Enough to buy them time? Another knock on the door made them both jump. Marcus went to the peephole and saw a woman in a business suit holding a microphone, a cameraman behind her with equipment already powered on. The red recording light blinked at him through the fisheye lens. He stepped back from the door without opening it, heart pounding. The woman knocked again, louder this time. Mr. Rivera, I'm Sarah Chen from Charleston today. We'd really like to talk to you about what happened last night. The public wants to hear your side of the story. Marcus stayed silent, motioning for Lily to be quiet too. After a minute, the knocking stopped. Through the peephole, he watched the woman and cameraman confer, then head down the hallway toward the stairs. But they'd be back. Or others would come. The video had made him public property, a story that needed feeding. He closed the blinds and locked the door, transforming the apartment into a cave. Lily watched with big eyes but didn't ask questions. She'd learned young that sometimes the world was scary, and the best thing to do was trust that Daddy would handle it. Marcus's phone rang, unknown number. He declined the call. It rang again immediately, different unknown number. He powered the phone off completely and set it on the counter. The GoFundMe page. He'd forgotten about it in the chaos of waking up. Marcus opened his laptop, hands shaking slightly as he navigated to the site. The number had climbed overnight. $52,000. 52,000. He refreshed the page and watched it tick up to 52,300. Marcus scrolled through the new donations, each one attached to a message from someone who'd seen the video, someone who'd been moved to help a stranger. The comments blurred together, stories about deaf family members, experiences with workplace injustice, memories of single parents who'd struggled. Everyone had a reason why this mattered to them, why Marcus's moment of standing up had resonated. He found himself reading every single comment, needing to understand why strangers would give money to someone they'd never met. Some people donated $5 with messages about how it was all they could spare but they wanted to help. Others donated hundreds, thousands even, without explanation. One message stopped him cold. $10,000, anonymous. For Lily's surgery and for having the courage I never did. $10,000 from someone who wouldn't even give their name. Marcus stared at the screen until his vision blurred, until the numbers stopped making sense and became abstract concepts instead of the difference between his daughter living or dying. Lily appeared beside him, trying to see what he was looking at. Marcus angled the screen away, not wanting her to know that strangers were watching their private desperation play out in public. "Is that about the video?" Lily's voice carried more curiosity than concern. "Yeah, baby. People saw what happened and they want to help us." "Help how?" Marcus struggled to find age-appropriate words for crowdfunding in the viral videos and the strange economy of internet sympathy. "Remember how we talked about needing money for your surgery? Some very nice people want to give us money to help with that." Lily's face lit up with hope that made Marcus's chest ache. "So I can get fixed?" Fixed, like she was broken, like her defective heart was something to be ashamed of rather than a medical condition she'd been born with through no fault of her own. "You're not broken, sweetheart. Your heart just needs some help to work better. And yes, this money will help us get you that surgery." Lily threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking the laptop off the table. "I can play with my friends. I can run. Miss Parker said after surgery I can do everything." Marcus held her and wondered if it was cruel to let her hope like this, to believe that the surgery would transform her life when there were still so many obstacles between here and there. The money was real, but what if it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared? What if the internet moved on to the next viral story and forgot about the waiter who'd stood up to a billionaire? His laptop chimed with a new email. The subject line read, "Employment opportunity, Harbor House Restaurant." Marcus clicked it open with Lily still wrapped around him. "Mr. Rivera, my name is Claire O'Brien and I manage Harbor House Restaurant in downtown Charleston. I saw the video of what happened last night at the Golden Oak. I was moved by your courage and your compassion. I'd like to offer you a position as a server at my restaurant. The pay is $15 per hour plus tips, and we offer health insurance after 90 days. If you're interested, please call me at the number below. I hope to hear from you." Claire O'Brien. $15 an hour, $3 more than the Golden Oak, and health insurance after 90 days, which meant coverage for Lily's medications, which meant Marcus read the email 3 more times to make sure it was real. Then he powered his phone back on and dialed the number before he could talk himself out of it. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice carrying a slight Irish lilt. "Harbor House, this is Claire. Mrs. O'Brien, this is Marcus Rivera. I just got your email about the server position." "Marcus, thank you for calling so quickly." Claire's voice warmed with genuine friendliness. "I meant every word in that email. What you did last night took real courage, and I'd be honored to have you on my team. When can you come in to talk?" Marcus glanced at Lily, who was watching him with intense focus, picking up on the importance of this conversation. "I could come today, if that works for you." "Perfect. How about 2 o'clock? That'll give us time to sit down properly before dinner service." Marcus agreed and ended the call in a daze. A job. He'd been fired less than 12 hours ago and already had another job. The universe had taken something away and given something back so quickly it felt like a magic trick, like there had to be a catch he wasn't seeing. But beggars couldn't afford to look for catches. He had 5 days until Lily's medication ran out. 4 days now, and a new job meant a new paycheck, meant breathing room, meant maybe they'd survive this after all. The rest of the morning passed in a surreal blur. Marcus tried to keep Lily entertained while dodging more knocks on the door from reporters who somehow had his address. He made the mistake of checking social media and found himself everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. The video had spread across every platform, each one with its own ecosystem of comments and hot takes. Some people called him a hero. Others said he'd overstepped. A few accused him of doing it for attention, of staging the whole thing. One particularly vicious thread discussed how he was just another deadbeat dad looking for handouts. Never mind that none of these people knew anything about his life beyond a 60-second video. Marcus closed the laptop and swore he wouldn't check again. That lasted about 15 minutes before he was back online, compulsively refreshing to see what strangers were saying about him, as if their opinions could change the reality of his situation. At 1:30, he called Mrs. Brennan to ask if she could watch Lily for a few hours. She arrived 10 minutes later, took one look at his face, and pulled him into a brief, fierce hug that made Marcus's eyes sting. "I saw the video," she said quietly. "You did good. I lost my job, and you got your soul back. Fair trade." She released him and looked toward Lily, who was coloring at the kitchen table with crayons they'd gotten from a restaurant kids menu months ago. "Go to your interview. We'll be fine." Marcus took the bus to Harbor House, unable to afford an Uber even with the GoFundMe money sitting in an account he hadn't yet figured out how to transfer. The restaurant was smaller than the Golden Oak, tucked into a renovated warehouse near the waterfront. Through the windows he could see exposed brick and reclaimed wood, a more casual atmosphere that suggested comfort over formality. Claire O'Brien was waiting for him at a corner table. She was perhaps 55, with graying red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of face that smiled easily. She stood when Marcus entered and shook his hand with a grip that was firm without trying to prove anything. "Marcus, thank you for coming. Sit, please." They settled into chairs and Claire signaled to someone behind the bar who brought over 2 glasses of water. The gesture was simple, but Marcus appreciated it. She was treating him like a person, not a supplicant begging for work. Claire folded her hands on the table and met his eyes directly. "I'm not going to waste your time with a formal interview. I've been in this business 30 years, and I can tell within 5 minutes if someone's going to work out. From what I saw in that video, you care about people. That's the only qualification I really need." Marcus's throat tightened. "Ms. O'Brien." "Claire, please." "Claire, I appreciate the offer, but I want to be honest with you. Victoria Blackwell said she'd make sure I never work in Charleston again. If you hire me, she might come after your restaurant." Claire's smile took on a sharp edge. "Let her try. I've been running Harbor House for 15 years without owing anybody favors or taking anybody's abuse. Victoria Blackwell doesn't scare me." She leaned forward slightly. "And between you and me, half the city's been waiting for someone to tell that woman off. You did what a lot of people wish they had the guts to do. I didn't plan it. I just couldn't stay quiet anymore." "The best acts of courage are usually the unplanned ones." Claire sat back. "So here's what I'm offering. 15 an hour plus tips. You keep your own tips. We don't pool here. Health insurance after 90 days. Full coverage, not that catastrophic nonsense most places offer. Flexible scheduling if you need it for your daughter. And a workplace where people are treated with respect, customer and staff alike." Marcus felt something unknot in his chest, some tension he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it wasn't permanent. "When can I start?" "Monday good for you?" 3 days. In 3 days he'd be employed again, earning money again, clawing his way back from the edge of the cliff he'd been teetering on for months. "Monday's perfect." They shook hands and Claire walked him to the door. As Marcus stepped out into the afternoon sun, she called after him. "Marcus, what you did for that young man, for Jordan, that mattered. Don't let anyone tell you different." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice, and headed for the bus stop. On the way, his phone buzzed with another message from Jordan confirming their 7 p.m. meeting at Broad Awakening Coffee. Marcus confirmed and spent the bus ride trying to figure out what he'd say when they met, what wisdom he could possibly offer someone who'd been living under Victoria Blackwell's control for 20 years. He got home to find Lily and Mrs. Brennan making origami cranes from newspaper. Lily's face scrunched in concentration as she tried to get the folds right. Mrs. Brennan looked up when Marcus entered, read something in his expression, and smiled. Good news? I got a job. Start Monday. Mrs. Brennan nodded like she'd expected nothing less. Good. Now maybe you sleep tonight instead of counting coins until dawn. Marcus wanted to ask how she knew about the late-night counting, but of course she knew. The walls were thin, and Mrs. Brennan noticed everything. He paid her for the afternoon, and she left with instructions to eat something substantial and stop reading whatever people were saying online. At 6:30, Marcus walked Lily to Miss Brennan's apartment for the evening, then headed to Broad Awakening Coffee. The place was exactly what its name suggested. A hipster coffee shop with exposed ductwork, mismatched furniture, and baristas with impressive facial hair. Marcus ordered a black coffee because it was cheapest and found a table by the window where he could watch the street. Jordan arrived at 7:03, moving carefully through the crowded shop like he was navigating a minefield. He'd changed clothes since last night, newer jeans, a flannel shirt that actually fit, but he still carried himself with that hunched shoulder defensiveness of someone expecting the world to hurt him. Marcus stood and caught Jordan's eye. The young man's face transformed, tension melting into something like relief. He crossed to the table and Marcus extended his hand. Jordan shook it firmly, then sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus wasn't sure where to begin, and Jordan seemed content to just sit in shared silence. Finally, Marcus broke it. How are you doing? Jordan's hands moved instinctively towards signing, then stopped. He forced words out instead, his voice rough from disuse. I'm better than I've been in a long time. I'm glad. Marcus meant it completely. That took a lot of courage last night. Jordan shook his head. You gave me permission. I've wanted to say those things for years, but I couldn't. Then you stood up, and I realized. He stopped, searching for words. I realized silence was killing me more than speaking ever could. A barista approached and Jordan ordered a latte. Marcus noticed the way Jordan positioned himself to read the barista's lips, the careful attention he paid to visual information most people processed without thought. When the barista left, Jordan pulled out his phone and typed something, then turned the screen to show Marcus. The text read, "Can I sign? Easier than talking." Marcus nodded and Jordan's whole body relaxed. His hands began to move in fluid patterns Marcus couldn't understand, but the meaning came through in his expression, in the way his face opened up when he could communicate without the struggle of forcing sound through vocal cords that felt unnatural to him. Jordan pulled out a small notebook and wrote, I've been texting with the people from the deaf community. They saw the video. For the first time in my life, I don't feel alone. You've never met other deaf people? Jordan wrote quickly. My mother wouldn't let me. She said I needed to live in the hearing world. That sign language would make me dependent. She hired speech therapists, audiologists, anyone who could help me pass as normal. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. You are normal. The smile Jordan gave him was cut and grateful at once. He wrote, I know that now, but I didn't for 20 years. The barista returned with Jordan's latte. Jordan took a sip, then continued writing. I moved out, got my own place. When? This morning, took everything important and left while she was at some charity breakfast. Jordan's hands paused, pen hovering over paper. I have access to a trust fund from my grandfather. She controlled it before, told me I needed her approval. But I'm 20 years old. It's legally mine. Marcus did the math. Jordan had turned 20 recently, which meant Victoria had been lying to him about needing her permission, had been controlling money that belonged to him. Another layer of abuse, another way she'd kept her son dependent and isolated. How much? Marcus asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's none of my business. Jordan wrote without hesitation. $840,000. I withdrew $50,000 this morning to cover rent and expenses. The rest stays invested. Marcus tried to process having that kind of money at 20 years old. It was more than he'd earned in his entire lifetime, more than enough to solve every problem he faced. For Jordan, it was just the mechanism of basic independence. Jordan's pen moved across the page again. I want to donate to your GoFundMe. Anonymously. Jordan, no, you don't have to. Jordan's expression turned stubborn. He wrote in large letters, you gave me my voice back. Let me give your daughter her life. They stared at each other across the small table. Marcus's eyes burned and he had to look away, blinking hard. When he trusted himself to speak again, his voice came out rough. Just for the surgery. Nothing else. Jordan wrote, deal. They sat together for another hour, Jordan filling pages of his notebook with stories about growing up in Victoria's house, about the loneliness of being the only deaf person in a hearing world that refused to accommodate him. Marcus shared about Camilla, about Lily's diagnosis, about the 3 years of barely surviving that had culminated in last night's explosion. As they talked, Marcus found himself thinking about the strange economics of privilege and oppression. Jordan had more money than Marcus would ever see, but he'd been imprisoned by it, isolated and controlled. Marcus had nothing, but he'd had Camilla's love and Lily's trust and the freedom to walk away from people who treated him like dirt. Neither of them had been free, not really, just trapped in different cages. Jordan's pen moved across the page. I'm enrolling in community college, graphic design. That's great. When? Spring semester. I want to learn what I'm actually good at instead of what my mother thinks I should do. Marcus smiled. What did she want you to do? Business degree. Take over her company eventually. Jordan's expression made clear what he thought of that plan. I like making things, drawing, designing, creating instead of destroying. They left the coffee shop as full darkness settled over Charleston. Jordan walked Marcus to the bus stop, and before they parted, he pulled out his phone and typed a message, then showed it to Marcus. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for helping me learn that deaf doesn't mean broken. Thank you for being brave when I couldn't be. I hope someday I can be like you. Marcus shook his head. Don't be like me. Be better. Be yourself. Jordan smiled and signed something Marcus didn't understand. Then he walked away into the night, shoulders straight in a way they hadn't been last night, carrying himself like someone who'd finally earned the right to take up space in the world. Marcus rode the bus home through Charleston streets, watching the city slide past through dirty windows. The GoFundMe had reached $63,000 according to his last check. Jordan would add $10,000 to that, which meant $73,000 total. Still short of what they needed for the surgery, but closer than Marcus had ever imagined being. He got home to find Lily already asleep, Mrs. Brennan having put her to bed. Marcus checked on his daughter, watched her breathe for a long moment, then went to his laptop. The video had reached 8 million views. 8 million people had watched him stand up to Victoria Blackwell, had watched Jordan find his voice, had witnessed that moment of transformation. The comments had multiplied exponentially, everyone with an opinion about what it meant, what it said about privilege and disability and standing up to power. Marcus skimmed through them until one caught his attention. Someone found Jordan's Instagram. He posted a photo of himself signing with the caption, "Day one of speaking my truth." The comments are full of deaf people welcoming him home. Marcus found the Instagram post and scrolled through hundreds of comments from the deaf community, people signing in photos and videos, welcoming Jordan, offering resources and friendship in solidarity. The contrast with Victoria's isolation couldn't have been starker. She'd tried to keep him alone, and the internet had connected him to thousands of people who understood exactly what he'd been through. Technology was strange. It could isolate or connect, destroy or build, depending on who controlled it and how it was used. Right now, it was saving Marcus's daughter and freeing Victoria's son, and there was a kind of justice in that, even if Marcus didn't fully understand the mechanisms. His email chimed, new message from an unfamiliar address, subject line, an apology. Marcus almost deleted it, assuming it was spam or a reporter trying a new angle, but something made him click it open. The message was long, single-spaced, and began, Mr. Rivera, you don't know me, but I was at the Golden Oak last night. I was sitting 3 tables away from Victoria Blackwell's party. Marcus read on. I watched the entire incident unfold. I saw how Victoria treated her son, saw how she mocked you, saw what you did. I'm a mother of three, and one of my daughters is autistic. Watching Victoria dismiss and diminish her own child made me physically ill because I've seen that dismissal 1,000 times. I've watched people treat my daughter like she's less than human because she communicates differently. When you stood up, I wanted to applaud, but I was too shocked to move. Then Jordan spoke, and I started crying right there at my table. My husband thought something was wrong, but I couldn't explain that I was crying because someone finally said what needed to be said. I'm writing because I want you to know that moment mattered. Not just for Jordan, not just for you, but for every parent who's watching their child navigate a world that wasn't built for them. You showed my daughters that someone will stand up for them, that their differences aren't weaknesses, that they're worth defending. I donated to your GoFundMe. I wish I could give more. Thank you for your courage. Angela Morrison. Marcus read the email twice, then a third time. He hadn't thought about the other people in the restaurant, hadn't considered that other parents might have been watching with their own stories, their own children who needed defending. The moment had felt personal, him and Victoria and Jordan, but it had played out in front of dozens of witnesses, each one processing it through their own experiences. He wanted to write back, to thank Angela for her words, but his hands hovered over the keyboard without typing. What could he say that wouldn't sound insufficient? How could he explain that he hadn't been thinking about broader implications, that he'd just been exhausted and angry and pushed past the point where silence felt survivable? In the end, he typed, "Thank you for writing. Your words mean more than you know. I hope your daughters grow up in a world that sees them clearly." Marcus, he sent it and closed the laptop. Tomorrow was Sunday. He had 2 days until he started work at Harbor House, 3 days until Lily's medication ran out. The GoFundMe was still climbing, donations still coming in from strangers who'd never meet him or his daughter, but who believed in whatever the video represented to them. Marcus checked on Lily one more time. She'd kicked off her blanket, and he pulled it back over her gently. Her stuffed rabbit had fallen to the floor. He picked it up and tucked it beside her, watching as her hand automatically reached for it, even in sleep. This was what mattered. What? Not the video views or the comments or the opinions of millions of strangers. Just this small girl breathing irregularly in a room with peeling paint, trusting that her father would keep her safe, even though he'd proven again and again that safety was beyond his control. Marcus went to bed exhausted but unable to sleep, his mind churning through everything that had happened in the past 36 hours. He'd lost a yo and gained another, lost his anonymity and gained $63,000 from strangers, stood up for someone he didn't know and somehow helped that person find freedom. The math didn't add up. The universe didn't work this way. You didn't get rewarded for doing the right thing. You got punished for it. But here he was, somehow better off than before despite having destroyed his own livelihood. He fell asleep thinking about Jordan's face when the young man had finally spoken, about the way 20 years of silence had shattered in a single moment of defiance. Thinking about how courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something mattered more than your own safety. Marcus dreamed about Camilla. In the dream, she was standing in their old apartment, the one they'd lived in before Lily was born, before the medical bills and the long shifts and the accident that took her away. She was smiling, wearing the green coat, and when she spoke, her voice carried no accusation. "You did good, mi amor. You finally stopped being silent." Marcus wanted to tell her it was too late, that he'd already lost so much, that doing good didn't pay for medication or rent or all the ways the world extracted payment for existing. But Dream Camilla just shook her head. It's never too late to start being yourself. Then she was gone and Marcus was awake in the pre-dawn darkness, the words echoing in his head. It's never too late. He wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that the past 3 years of swallowed pride hadn't permanently damaged something essential inside him. Sunday passed quietly. Marcus kept the blinds closed and ignored the knocks on the door from reporters who still thought he owed them his story. He played board games with Lily, read her the same picture books they'd read 100 times, and tried to pretend everything was normal, even though they both knew it wasn't. In the evening, Jordan texted, "Donated 10K to your GoFundMe. Check your email." Marcus checked. The GoFundMe balance now showed $73,500. Still short of the $87,000 they needed, but close enough that he could see the finish line. He called Dr. Chen's office and left a message on the after-hours line. "This is Marcus Rivera, Lily's father. I'd like to schedule her surgery as soon as possible. I can pay the deposit now." Monday morning, Marcus put on clean clothes and took the bus to Harbor House. Claire was waiting for him with a smile and a uniform shirt that actually fit properly. No coffee stains or frayed collar. She walked him through the systems, introduced him to the kitchen staff, showed him how they ran service. Everything about Harbor House felt different from the Golden Oak. Smaller, more intimate, with a focus on local seafood and simple preparations instead of French technique and luxury ingredients. The staff talked to each other like colleagues instead of competitors. Claire called everyone by name and actually seemed to know details about their lives. During Marcus's lunch break, Claire sat with him in the small office and slid a paper across the desk. "Health insurance enrollment forms. I know you're supposed to wait 90 days, but I made a call. You're covered starting today." Marcus stared at the forms. "Claire, I can't." "Yes, you can. My restaurant, my rules." She tapped the paper. "Fill these out. Get your daughter on the insurance. Let the adults in your life help you for once." Marcus's hand shook as he filled out the paperwork, checking boxes and signing where indicated. Lily's name went on the line for dependents. Her pre-existing condition was documented. By the time he handed the forms back to Claire, he was blinking hard against tears he couldn't let fall in his new manager's office. Claire took the forms without comment, just patted his shoulder once, and told him to get back on the floor. Marcus's first shift at Harbor House went smoothly. The customers were different here, more families, more regulars who knew the staff by name, fewer people treating servers like servants. He made decent tips and got home at a reasonable hour for the first time in months. Lily was waiting up, coloring at the kitchen table. She looked up when Marcus entered, and her face split into a smile. "How was your new job, Daddy?" "Good, baby, really good." And for the first time in 3 years, that answer felt true. The rest of the week passed in a strange new rhythm. Marcus worked shifts at Harbor House, coming home with energy left over to actually spend time with Lily. The GoFundMe climbed past 80,000, then 85,000. Dr. Chen's office called back and scheduled Lily's surgery for 3 weeks out, pending final tests and clearances. On Friday night, Marcus got an email with the subject line, "We need to talk." The sender was Victoria Blackwell. Marcus's hand hovered over the delete button. He didn't need Victoria's poison in his inbox, didn't need whatever justification or attack she'd crafted. But curiosity won over common sense. He clicked it open. The email was surprisingly brief. "Mr. Rivera, I won't apologize for what I said at the restaurant. I won't apologize for how I've raised my son. But I will acknowledge that you were right about one thing. I forgot what it's like to be kind. I've spent 20 years building an empire, and I lost my son in the process. I'm writing to let you know I've donated $500,000 to the Charleston Deaf Community Center in Jordan's name. It won't fix what I broke, but it's a start. I'm also starting therapy and learning ASL. Jordan may never forgive me. I wouldn't blame him, but I need him to know I'm trying. Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see. Victoria Blackwell." Marcus read the email 3 times, trying to detect sarcasm or manipulation and finding only exhaustion. Victoria Blackwell sounded like someone who'd been forced to look in a mirror and hadn't liked what she'd seen. Whether that meant genuine change or just better public relations, Marcus couldn't tell and didn't particularly care. He forwarded the email to Jordan with the message, "Thought you should see this." Jordan's response came an hour later. "Not ready to talk to her yet, but maybe someday. Thank you for everything, Marcus. You changed my life." Marcus set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. The peeling paint and cracked window and second-hand furniture. Lily asleep in the next room, her heart still damaged, but surgery scheduled. The GoFundMe at $87,000. Exactly what they needed. A new job that treated him like a human being. A young man he'd helped free from 20 years of isolation. It wasn't victory. Victory implied winning something. This was just survival with slightly better odds, existence with marginally more breathing room. But after 3 years of drowning, breathing room felt revolutionary. Marcus opened his laptop one final time before bed. The video had reached 20 million views. 20 million people had watched that moment, had formed opinions, had moved on to the next viral story. But for Marcus and Jordan, That moment kept rippling outward, kept changing things in ways neither of them could have predicted. He thought about what Camilla had said in the dream. It's never too late to start being yourself. Maybe she was right. Maybe the past 3 years of silence had been necessary preparation for the moment when silence became impossible. Maybe losing everything had been the only way to discover he'd never actually had anything to lose except his self-respect. Marcus closed the laptop and went to check on Lily one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling in that irregular rhythm that would soon finally be fixed. He kissed her forehead and whispered promises he could finally believe he might keep. In 3 weeks, she'd have surgery. In 3 months, Jordan would start community college. And however long it took, Victoria might learn how to be a better mother. The world would keep turning and bills would keep coming and new crises would replace old ones. But tonight, in this moment, Marcus Rivera allowed himself to believe that speaking up had mattered. That courage had been worth the that maybe, just maybe, the universe occasionally rewarded doing the right thing instead of punishing it. He fell asleep on the couch, too tired to make it to bed, and dreamed of nothing at all. The morning of Lily's surgery arrived with unseasonable warmth, October sun streaming through the hospital windows like a promise Marcus didn't quite trust. He sat beside her bed in the pre-op area, holding her small hand while nurses moved efficiently through their checklists. Lily's eyes were heavy from the pre-medication, but she fought to stay focused on his face. Her words came out slurred, childish. "Daddy, what if I don't wake up?" Marcus's chest constricted. He'd spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, rehearsing reassurances that now felt flimsy as tissue paper. He squeezed her hand gently, feeling how fragile her bones were under his fingers. "You'll wake up, baby. Dr. Chen is the best surgeon in Charleston. She's done this operation hundreds of times." But what if? No what ifs. Marcus leaned close enough that Lily could see nothing but his face. "I'll be right here when you open your eyes. That's a promise, and Daddy always keeps his promises." It was a lie. He'd broken promises before. Promised Camilla he'd pick up her prescription. Promised Lily they'd go to the aquarium next month. Promised himself he'd never let fear make him silent. But this promise felt different, carved from something harder than hope. Lily's eyelids drooped. "Tell me the thing Mama used to say." Marcus swallowed against the tightness in his throat. "Love is stronger than fear. Love is why we keep going even when we're scared. And I love you more than all the stars in the universe." "More than all the oceans," Lily whispered, their ritual completing even as consciousness slipped away from her. Dr. Chen appeared in scrubs, her surgical cap already in place. She touched Marcus's shoulder briefly, a gesture of comfort that carried the weight of professional competence. "We're ready for her, Marcus. The surgery will take about 4 hours. Someone will update you every hour." Marcus stood, his legs unsteady, and watched them wheel Lily through the double doors into the operating theater. The doors swung shut with mechanical finality, and suddenly he was alone in the pre-op area with nothing to do but wait and worry and catalog all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. He found his way to the surgical waiting room, a space designed to contain anxiety with its comfortable chairs and soothing paint colors and magazines no one could actually focus on reading. Jordan was already there, sitting in the corner with a sketchbook open on his lap. He looked up when Marcus entered and signed something that Marcus had learned meant, "She'll be okay." Marcus had been taking basic ASL classes online for the past 3 weeks, Jordan's patient tutoring filling the gaps in his knowledge. He could now sign simple greetings and emotions, could hold basic conversations without needing pen and paper. It wasn't fluency, but it was connection. Marcus signed back clumsily. "Thank you for being here." Jordan set aside his sketchbook and pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. The text-to-speech voice was mechanical, but the sentiment was genuine. "You sat with me when I was invisible. I sit with you now." They settled into companionable silence, Jordan returning to his skating while Marcus stared at the clock on the wall. 8:03 in the morning. Dr. Chen had said 4 hours, which meant noon 03 if everything went perfectly. Later if complications arose. Marcus tried not to think about what complications might look like. His daughter's heart stopping on the operating table, her small body unable to handle the trauma, Dr. Chen emerging with that particular expression doctors wore when they had to deliver unbearable news. The first hour crawled past. A nurse appeared at 9:05 with an update. Lily was under anesthesia, incision made. Dr. Chen had begun the repair. Everything proceeding normally. The nurse's smile was practiced but sincere, designed to soothe without making promises. Marcus thanked her and returned to his chair. Jordan had been sketching the whole time, his pencil moving across paper in fluid strokes. He turned the sketchbook to show Marcus, a detailed drawing of Lily sleeping, peaceful, with angel wings sprouting from her shoulders. "That's beautiful," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. Jordan signed, "She's strong, like her father." "I'm not strong, I'm terrified." Jordan's hands moved in patterns Marcus was beginning to understand. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love when fear says run. The words settled into Marcus like stones in still water. He thought about the night at the Golden Oak, about choosing to speak up when every instinct screamed at him to stay silent, about the 3 weeks since, building a new life from the rubble of the old one, about sitting here now, trusting strangers to cut into his daughter's chest and repair the organ that kept her alive. The second hour passed with glacial slowness. At 10:07, the nurse returned. Valve repair complete. Dr. Chen was closing the chest cavity. Still no complications. Marcus allowed himself to breathe slightly easier, though his hands remained clenched in his lap. Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite pain, but something adjacent. He showed Marcus the screen. The text was from Victoria. "I know Jordan is with you today. Please tell him I'm thinking of Lily, and of him, always of him." Marcus looked at Jordan. "Do you want to respond?" Jordan's fingers hovered over the phone, then lowered. He shook his head and typed a different message. This one for Marcus. "Not ready yet, but I don't hate her anymore. That's progress." 3 weeks ago, Victoria had started therapy, according to the sporadic updates Jordan shared. She was learning ASL with a private tutor, attending support groups for parents of deaf children, trying to understand 20 years too late what she should have known from the beginning. Jordan had agreed to one coffee meeting, supervised and brief, during which Victoria had signed a clumsy apology and Jordan had signed back that he needed time. Time was the currency neither of them could buy, the resource that couldn't be crowdfunded or donated or earned through good behavior. But maybe time was also what healed, given enough of it. The third hour brought Claire from Harbor House, carrying coffee in cardboard cups and pastries wrapped in wax paper. She handed one to Marcus and nodded to Jordan, who signed his thanks. "Thought you could use some fuel." Claire's Irish accent made the words sound like music. "How's she doing?" "Surgery's almost done. So far everything's perfect." Claire settled into a chair beside them. "Been praying for that little girl. And for you. You've been through enough." Marcus sipped the coffee, black, exactly how he took it, because Claire paid attention to details most people missed. "I don't know how to thank everyone. You, Jordan, the people who donated to the GoFundMe, strangers I'll never meet who gave us this chance. You thank them by living well, by being present for your daughter, by remembering that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." The fourth hour arrived with mechanical precision. At 12:09, Dr. Chen emerged from the operating theater, still in her surgical scrubs, pulling off her mask. Her face was tired but pleased, and Marcus felt his heart restart in his chest. "The surgery went perfectly, Doctor." Chen's voice carried professional satisfaction. "The mitral valve repair was successful. Lily's heart is pumping efficiently for the first time in her life. She'll be in recovery for about an hour, then we'll move her to ICU for monitoring." Marcus stood on shaking legs, Jordan rising beside him. "She's okay? Really okay?" "Really okay. She'll need time to heal, follow-up appointments, but Marcus," Dr. Chen's smile widened, "your daughter is going to live a normal, healthy life. She can run, play sports, do everything other kids do. The repair should last her entire lifetime." Marcus felt his knees buckle. Jordan caught him, steadying him with surprising strength for someone so thin. Claire was there too, her hand on his back, murmuring something in Irish that sounded like a prayer or a blessing. "Can I see her?" Marcus's voice came from somewhere far away, disconnected from his body. "When she's in recovery and stable, about an hour." Dr. Chen touched his arm. She's going to be groggy and uncomfortable, but she's going to be fine. You did it, Marcus. You saved your daughter's life. But he hadn't done it alone. That was the truth Dr. Chen's words glossed over. He'd stood up at the right moment, and the internet had transformed that moment into salvation, had crowdfunded his daughter's life in $50 increments. Jordan had donated $10,000 because Marcus had seen him when he was invisible. Claire had given him a job and expedited health insurance because she believed in rewarding courage. Mrs. Brennan had watched Lily for free, or nearly free, because kindness sometimes looked like practical help instead of empty sympathy. Marcus had saved Lily the way drowning people get saved, by reaching for hands extended from shore, by accepting that you can't survive alone, no matter how much pride insists otherwise. The hour in the waiting room felt longer than the previous 4 combined. Marcus paced while Jordan sketched, and Claire made phone calls to Harbor House, rearranging the schedule so Marcus could take the next week off. None of them talked much. The waiting room's tension had transformed into something else. Not quite celebration, but relief so profound it felt physical. Finally, a nurse appeared and led them to the ICU. Lily lay in a bed that seemed enormous around her small frame, tubes and wires connecting her to monitors that beeped steady reassurance. Her chest rose and fell in a rhythm that looked, for the first time Marcus could remember, completely regular. He approached slowly, afraid sudden movement might shatter this fragile new reality. Lily's eyes were closed, her face pale under the harsh hospital lighting, but peaceful. No tension in her forehead, no tightness around her mouth that usually signaled pain she was hiding. Marcus took her hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. "I'm here, baby, just like I promised." Lily's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. The nurse adjusted something on one of the monitors. "She'll be drifting in and out for a while. The anesthesia takes time to wear off completely. But she's stable. You can stay as long as you like." Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed and settled in. Jordan took up position near the window, giving them space while still being present. Claire squeezed Marcus's shoulder and whispered that she'd bring dinner later, then left to handle her restaurant. The afternoon passed in increments of waking and sleeping. Lily would rouse enough to recognize Marcus, squeeze his hand, whisper questions he answered with soothing lies about how she'd feel better soon. Then she'd slip back under, her body demanding rest to heal the trauma it had endured. Around 4 p.m., Lily woke more fully, her eyes focusing on Marcus's face with clearer recognition. "Did it work, Daddy?" Marcus's throat closed up. He managed to nod, then found his voice. "It worked perfectly. Your heart is fixed. Dr. Chen said you're going to be able to do everything other kids do." Tears leaked from the corners of Lily's eyes. "I can play, run around, not get tired anymore?" "Not right away. You need to heal first. But yes, baby, all of that." Lily's smile was radiant despite the pain and exhaustion. "Can I finally join the soccer team?" Marcus laughed, the sound surprising him. "When you're healed, you can join any team you want. You can run marathons if you feel like it." "I don't want to run marathons. Just want to keep up with my friends." Lily's eyes started to close again. "Love you, Daddy. Love you more than all the stars. More than all the oceans," she whispered, and then sleep reclaimed her. 3 days later, they transferred Lily from ICU to a regular room. Jordan visited every afternoon, bringing art supplies and teaching Lily basic signs. She picked up the alphabet quickly, her young brain absorbing the visual language like a sponge. Within a week, she could introduce herself, say please and thank you, express basic emotions. Mrs. Brennan appeared with homemade soup and stern instructions about rest. Ray from the Golden Oak sent gift baskets of food that Marcus suspected came from Ray's personal grocery budget rather than restaurant surplus. Claire stopped by after her shifts with books and magazines and the easy companionship of someone who understood that conversation wasn't always necessary. On day 5, as Lily dozed in her hospital bed, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He almost ignored it. He'd gotten dozens of messages from reporters and internet strangers in the week since the video went viral. But something made him check. The text read, "Mr. Rivera, this is Victoria Blackwell. I'd like to meet with you and Jordan if you're both willing. I understand if you're not. I have things I need to say in person. Things I can't write in emails or texts." Marcus showed the message to Jordan, who'd been sketching in the corner. Jordan's expression cycled through several emotions: anger, pain, uncertainty, something that might have been hope. Jordan typed, "I'll meet her if you're there too. I'm not ready to face her alone." Marcus texted back, "When and where?" Victoria's response came immediately, like she'd been waiting with her phone in hand. "Waterfront Park, Saturday at 2 p.m. Thank you for considering this." Saturday arrived with November rain, the kind that fell steady and cold, turning Charleston's streets into rivers of reflected light. Marcus and Jordan met at the park entrance, both wearing jackets that weren't quite warm enough. Victoria was already there, standing under an umbrella near one of the benches, and Marcus almost didn't recognize her. She'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no salon styling. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of designer clothes. But the biggest change was in her face. The hard edges had softened, or maybe collapsed, leaving something raw and uncertain underneath. Victoria saw them, and her hands immediately began to sign. The movements were clumsy, unpracticed, but the effort was undeniable. "Thank you for coming." Jordan signed back, faster, more fluid. "I almost didn't." Victoria nodded, then spoke aloud while signing simultaneously, a technique Marcus recognized as simultaneous communication, imperfect but attempting inclusion. "I wouldn't have blamed you. I haven't earned the right to your time." They moved to a covered pavilion to escape the rain. Victoria sat on one bench, Marcus and Jordan on another facing beyond her, the space between them measured in more than physical distance. Victoria's hands shook as she signed, her voice matching the movement. "I need to say things I should have said 20 years ago. I failed you, Jordan. Failed you every day of your life. I was so afraid the world would hurt you that I became the thing that hurt you most." Jordan's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched in his lap. Marcus recognized the gesture. Jordan always gripped his own fingers when he was fighting not to feel too much. Victoria continued, tears streaming down her face now. "Your father died because he refused to admit weakness, because he thought asking for help made him less of a man, and I swore I'd never let you be that vulnerable. But I confused strength with silence, protection with control." Her signing faltered, but she pushed through. "I tried to fix you when you were never broken. I tried to make you fit in a world that should have been making room for you." The words Marcus had spoken at the Golden Oak echoed back at him through Victoria's mouth. She'd taken his accusation. "You forgot what it's like to be kind," and spent 5 weeks excavating what it meant, where it came from, how to begin repairing the damage. Jordan's hands moved in sharp, angry patterns. "Why now? Because millions of people saw what you did? Because it hurt your reputation? Because a stranger saw my son as a person when I'd stopped seeing him at all?" Victoria looked at Marcus, then back to Jordan. "Because I watched that video 50 times trying to understand what that waiter saw that I'd missed. And I finally realized he saw you. Just you. Not my disappointment or my fear or my need to control. Just a young man who deserved to be heard." Jordan stood abruptly, pacing to the pavilion's edge, where rain created a curtain between him and the park beyond. His shoulders shook, and Marcus couldn't tell if he was crying or just breathing hard. Victoria remained seated, but her voice broke. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I'm trying to become someone worthy of being your mother. I'm in therapy 3 times a week. I'm learning ASL properly, not just the basics. I donated $500,000 to build a deaf community center because I can't give you back your childhood, but maybe I can help other deaf kids have what you should have had." Jordan turned back, his face wet with rain or tears. His hands signed viciously. "You can't buy redemption." "I know. That's why I'm not trying to buy it. I'm just—" Victoria's signing faltered again. "I'm trying to earn the right to be in your life, even a small part, even just as someone who exists on the periphery and wants you to be happy." The three of them sat in silence, broken only by rain drumming on the pavilion roof. Marcus felt like an intruder in this moment, an audience to something too intimate for witnesses. But Jordan had asked him to be here, had needed the buffer of another person's presence to feel safe confronting his mother. Finally, Jordan signed, his movement slow and deliberate. "I can't come home, not now, maybe not ever." I understand. But maybe Jordan paused, searching for signs to match his thoughts. Maybe we can try coffee once a month, just talking, just two people trying to understand each other. Victoria's face crumpled with relief. I'd like that, more than anything. They made plans for their first official meeting, set boundaries about what topics were safe and which needed more time. Marcus watched Victoria sign promises she'd probably break unintentionally, watched Jordan accept them with guarded hope, and thought about how healing looked nothing like the movies suggested. No dramatic reconciliation, no swelling music, just two damaged people choosing to keep trying despite every reason to give up. As they prepared to leave, Victoria turned to Marcus. I owe you an apology too, for how I treated you at the restaurant, for trying to ruin your reputation, for being exactly the kind of person who makes the world harder than it needs to be. Marcus considered several responses, ranging from acceptance to rejection. What came out was simpler than either. Your son taught me that silence costs more than speaking. Thank you for learning that lesson too, even if it came late. Victoria nodded, signed her goodbye to Jordan, and walked away into the rain. Marcus and Jordan stood under the pavilion watching her go, both processing what had just happened. Jordan signed. That was harder than I expected. Healing usually is. Will she keep her promises? Marcus thought about the question, about how promises were easy to make and hard to keep, about how intention mattered less than action. I don't know, but she's trying. That's more than she was doing before. They left the park and went to the hospital together. Lily was being discharged the next day, cleared to go home with instructions for rest and gradual activity increase. She greeted them with a smile that was stronger each time Marcus saw it, her body already responding to a heart that worked properly for the first time in her life. Jordan showed Lily his latest sketch, a portrait of her surrounded by butterflies, each wing detailed with patterns that suggested movement and freedom. Lily studied it with serious appreciation, then signed her thanks carefully, each gesture deliberate. You're getting really good at this, Jordan's mechanical voice came through his phone. Soon you'll be teaching me new signs. Lily giggled. Can you teach me how to say soccer player? Jordan showed her the signs, and Lily practiced them repeatedly, determined to get them perfect. Marcus watched his daughter and his unlikely friend, this young man who'd been freed by the same moment that had cost Marcus his job, and felt something settle in his chest. This was what victory looked like, not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real. His daughter was healing. Jordan was building a life on his own terms. Victoria was trying to become better. The world hadn't magically transformed into a fair place, but small corners of it had shifted toward justice. That night, with Lily asleep in her hospital bed and Jordan gone home to his apartment, Marcus sat in the uncomfortable visitor's chair and opened his laptop. The video had been viewed 37 million times now. The GoFundMe had exceeded $90,000, the excess earmarked for medical expenses and Lily's future education. His email contained hundreds of messages from strangers sharing their own stories, thanking him for doing what they wished they'd been brave enough to do. He couldn't respond to them all, couldn't adequately express what their support had meant. So he wrote one message and posted it as an update on the GoFundMe page. Thank you doesn't seem like enough for what you've all given us. You saved my daughter's life. You showed me that courage multiplies when it's witnessed, that standing up matters even when it costs everything. Lily had her surgery and she's going to be okay. More than okay, she's going to thrive. Because of you. Because strangers chose kindness. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve this gift. Marcus Rivera. He posted the message and closed the laptop. Tomorrow they'd go home. Lily would start the slow process of healing, of discovering what her body could do when it wasn't fighting itself. Marcus would return to Harbor House and continue building the life he'd accidentally created when he chose speaking over silence. The future was uncertain in all the usual ones. Money would be tight, challenges would arise, the world wouldn't stop being cruel just because one viral video had briefly suggested better was possible. But Marcus had learned something in the past 6 weeks that felt like truth. You survived by accepting help. You healed by forgiving yourself for needing it. And sometimes courage looked like standing up, but other times it looked like sitting still and letting strangers save you. Marcus checked on Lily one final time. Her chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm, her heart beating strong and steady, pumping life through her small body with the efficiency of precision engineering. He kissed her forehead and whispered promises into her hair, promises about soccer teams and art classes, and a future that stretched beyond mere survival into actual living. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty room, to Dr. Chen and Jordan and Claire, to Mrs. Brennan and Ray, to $90,000 worth of strangers who'd chosen to help. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes losing everything is how you discover what you actually needed all along." Lily stirred in her sleep, smiled without waking, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Not alone anymore. Never alone again.